I'm Gray Thompson. Welcome back to the Fête College Football Podcast. I am joined by my good friend, mentor, and smelly person, Jay Spivey.
Well, I'm happy to be here. We're actually recording from my house out on the patio with the dog. So I think that's kind of a cool thing.
Kinda. It pales in comparison to our Saturday, though, doesn't it?
The idea that we got to go to the Clemson Furman game and be on the sidelines, that was a bucket list, phenomenal. I'm telling you, personally, here in the alma mater, on the field, and singing along with the student section, I had teary-eyed moments and goosebumps all day.
Perpetual goosebumps, right?
And it was hotter than hot.
It was hot.
For everybody that doesn't know, the field is grass. But where we are, you're walking around, it's AstroTurf. And you can literally feel the heat come up from the ground.
It's true.
And it had to be over 100 on the field that day.
I put my knee down to get some stability for a shot, for a picture, and my knee got burnt from that pulverized rubber under the turf. So, yeah, the difference between the grass and the turf is a big deal. But make no mistake, we're not complaining. This experience was just so incredible. And we were there with 80,000 people, 80,000 friends, I should say, and everybody was hot. So at least we weren't alone.
Well, it's if there's a good example of tribalism, it was a happy day. Everybody was happy. Everybody was super nice to us.
Yes.
Getting out there and filming and taking pictures and all. The only downside was I was trying to shoot some video with the phone, and it was so hot that my phone shut off.
That's right. Your phone quit.
Because I missed being able to videotape them running down the hill. But other than that, the experience, being that close, those guys are bigger, faster. And tell them about the Kelly Bryant. We were on national news. We were seen all over the world because we were in the corner when Kelly Bryant scored that touchdown.
Yeah, I figure we owe the national television viewing audience an apology for us being on their television feed. We were right there in the end zone when Kelly Bryant comes strolling in untouched to the end zone, stands there with his arms crossed and the football in his hand, the ump putting his arms up for the touchdown. He's just looking right at me as I'm snapping pictures, just geeking out. It was so much fun. I had high expectations for this day and this game. It exceeded all of them. All of them. It was absolutely fantastic.
Well, I just think Kelly Bryant played well. Trevor Lawrence played well. ETN did okay. Did you see that kid Dixon? Holy cow, that running back is going to sneak out and scare some people this year.
I thought I saw him, but he was too fast. I struggled to
It's like an orange blur.
He really was fast.
And give it to Furman. They played tough. And I was listening to some of the shows yesterday, today. There are a lot of people. I thought Clemson looked kind of vulnerable. You're going to say it's the first game, jitters. But Furman, Clemson didn't look overpowering even though the score was overpowering.
Yes.
And that always makes me worry about the upcoming game with them and Texas A&M.
I try to judge all football teams based on what I see. So to speak, try to remove the uniforms, the colors, the expectations, the narrative, that sort of thing. Furman looked a lot like they did last year. They're tough. They're really fast on offense, and they throw a lot of packages out there that are these run screens and run just these odd formations that it's hard to prepare for. I think Clemson did a really good job of playing a team that was not afraid of Clemson at all. Furman was out there. They played physical for four quarters. That's the truth. Hard. The score doesn't indicate how good of a team Furman is. That's the truth.
Yeah, that is the truth. And maybe it's a great experience, and everybody loves to poo-poo these cupcake games, but it is a better form of scrimmage. If the games were cupcake-ish, and we'll go through some of them this first week, they're just as damn cupcake-ish, even more so this second week.
Or worse.
Furman gets to travel to Elon, which used to be called the Fighting Christians up until the year 2000 when they changed their name to the Phoenix. So is it the Phoenixes or the Phoeni?
The Phoeni? Don't say that.
So Furman's going to play Elon. I'm sure Furman's going to give Elon all they could ever dream of in a game. It's going to be tough, and Furman's going to, I think, crush Elon.
Furman was an awful lot of fun to watch last year. All signs point to them being just as fun to watch this year. They are a good, strong, competitive football team. FU all the time. I'm stoked to watch as much Furman as I can. They just were kind of outmatched against Clemson, but you're right. It was a good test.
Yeah.
It really was.
Well, I'm just excited. Anytime Furman could come over and play Clemson, I'm sort of against these cupcake games, but at least this is a rivalry that goes back pre-World War II when Furman used to beat everybody. So I kind of feel like it's okay that Furman plays Clemson.
They've beaten Clemson before.
Oh, yeah, and back in the day, I mean, they beat Clemson in basketball, baseball, football, everything, along with South Carolina and NC State and a bunch of other schools. So times are different now, but I think that's kind of a neat, very friendly, comfortable, I wouldn't even say rivalry.
It's not a rivalry.
It's just kind of a great setup.
It's money sharing.
Yeah, and Furman gets, I'm sure, a bunch of money for coming to play at Clemson.
As they should.
Well,
I can't ignore the poetic justice of Clemson's very first college football game in 1896 when Jason, how old were you back then? About 30?
No, I was 12.
Well, their very first football game was against Furman. Do you know who won that game, Jay?
Probably Furman.
No, it was Clemson. It was the same result. But to see the opener for this 2018 team against Furman at home, it's hard to ignore that kind of history. It's fascinating, and like I said, everything just was spectacular from beginning to end. The heat was a side effect. Nebraska's game got canceled. They had another sellout game, brand new coach. They gave them a bunch of money. It's an exciting time for them. Canceled due to rain. The team that came to town, I can't even remember it off the top of my head, but they didn't want to play it. They didn't want to play Sunday. Nebraska was ready to reschedule that game. It's Labor Day weekend. It's not that crazy to ask, but no football for Nebraska, and that stings. So I can deal with the heat. Yeah, for sure.
The heat's fine with me now.
And as a photographer, it was sunny all day long. That's so good for me. It made my job a whole lot easier, and I got great shots all day. Check out the Fête Greenville Facebook page to see those shots.
Yeah,
I'm really happy with
the pictures are fantastic.
Yeah, the video.
I mean, we had such a great time.
So good.
Thank you, Clemson. Thank you, Libby.
Thank you, Libby. Yes. So good to us.
Everybody was nice as they could be.
Yeah.
It was the best experience I've had at the Clemson game in 30 years.
Really did feel like we were behind the velvet rope, so to speak.
Oh,
too,
I know.
Right?
And
it treated us so well.
Everybody we dealt with, all the way to other photographers and everybody else on the field, were as kind-hearted, easygoing. The police, the security people. I even talked to a Furman band administrator. He ranted about how Clemson treats the Furman band better than anywhere else they travel and play.
Is that right?
And he said it could get downright mean and rude when they travel to like NC State or South Carolina and Columbia or any of these other schools. But he said Clemson treats them like they're long-lost friends. And that, again, another reason why I love the idea that Clemson and Furman still play each other. I mean, there's an admiration there that I think is deep, and everybody in the upstate appreciates that.
They look good in those unis too, man.
Yeah,
well, everything about it. This was just a great day.
Great day. So, some of the other games that were big this past weekend. Number one, let's talk about Alabama.
I've heard of them.
Tua starting, that you didn't really see that coming, but yet, it was kind of a 50-50 split on what was going to happen. It seemed like all the major commentators just fully expected Tua to start.
Yeah, and they weren't wrong, but they were still upset about the fact that they were not told that they weren't wrong beforehand.
Well, Saban could do a much better job at public relations if he just chose to do better. And if he approached his public relations the way he approaches coaching the team, he would be beloved by the press.
I disagree. I think he holds the media and everyone around him to the same standard that he holds his team. Do your best. The problem is a lot of these media jobs aren't necessarily a job where you can do your personal best. Your job is to ask him this question that he's not going to answer, but your boss is also going to say, if you don't ask it, he's not going to answer it.
Well, I can simply say I like Alabama and I want them to do well, and I want Clemson to play Alabama forever and ever.
You're in luck.
But I can tell you, as not a Roll Tide elephant true believer drinker of the Kool-Aid, if Saban treated everyone else like he treats his players in trying to coach the best out of everyone and make the best situation, he would be beloved in the press. So it's his problem to fix, and he doesn't care to fix it.
Hates it.
So
he hates it. He hates us.
He's
Jay.
the
We're
best.
media.
He's the best coach in college football by a long shot.
Sure.
And I'm telling you, they look like Louisville did not look bad. Alabama looked great.
Okay.
And to me, it seemed like Louisville looked pretty good on offense and defense. But, God, Alabama, and especially with Tua, and the dynamics are going downfield, and he ran it pretty well and scrambled fantastically for the most part.
Yeah.
He's going to make some mistakes because he's young. But holy cow, it just changes the dynamic of the game if you know that Alabama can score, 30 points and a half.
Yeah.
I mean, that's scary.
It's terrifying. It's funny, though. Nick Saban will use any competitive advantage he can get, right? It's a little trivial to not release your starting quarterback, I agree, but at least it's something of an advantage to make sure the other team doesn't know who to prepare for first, and they have to prepare for both. Clemson's in the same situation. You got to prepare for both Kelly Bryant and Trevor Lawrence. It's not a bad strategy. It's just not as much fun to not know. And now we know, and nobody's really all that excited about it anyway. But there was a funny stat in the first quarter at the bottom. It said Tua Tagovailoa has completed as many passes in the first quarter as any Alabama quarterback since 2016. And I'm like, oh, wow, what a crazy... Wait, 2016? That was 2 years ago, and that was Jalen Hurts.
Right.
The other guy, right? Really?
The only thing I worry about with Hurts is that if they go another 2 games and he plays as sparingly as he did in this first one, I think it would behoove him to drop off the program so he gains a year of eligibility.
It's a tough place to be, isn't it? Because you want to have a good backup quarterback. They played Mac Jones, too, and nobody's talking about that. But
how good is Mac Jones?
They argue that he's better than Jalen Hurts in practice, and he's certain. I'd be happy with him as a starter just about anywhere, including in Alabama.
So Tua's got a good backup.
Yeah. But experience is kind of paramount. Jalen Hurts obviously has more than any of them.
Yeah.
He wasn't terrible. In fact, I'd argue he had improved as a passer. There were a few. Now, I'll sound like an Alabama homer here when I say Jerry Jeudy wasn't on his route during a wide open pass, but Jalen Hurts definitely missed some reads on wide open receivers, too, including Najee Harris streaking through the middle. And Tua was not missing those reads. He overthrew a guy who still managed to catch it. He really did look like an exclamation mark that, again, this is why I didn't expect Alabama to cover the spread.
Right.
I did not expect them to throw the ball so much. They threw the ball more than they ran the ball. That is exceptionally rare. The last time they did that was against Georgia in the national title game, and we know the end result, but Tua is the reason why. He's an exclamation point.
Did you see where the band came out and did the, was it
26? Second and 26.
Yeah. And I thought, that's got to be a burr under Georgia's saddle.
Yeah, I found out about it through
years.
Georgia fans. And, it stinks for them because of what it represents. For Alabama, it represents the moment we won a national title. So I don't think it's necessarily a middle finger, but it is going to sting, right? It's like serving peanut butter when some people in the room are allergic.
So Alabama plays Arkansas State.
That's right.
And I'm assuming they're playing at Tuscaloosa.
That's true. You want to go? I wish we could be there.
So what's the spread on that going to be? Like another 48 points or something?
I don't know what the spread is going to be. I don't know what the spread should be. I can only imagine Vegas is kind of going bonkers with Alabama bets now because they, like you said, they impressed in week one. Week one is a time where everybody's learning. Against Louisville, what I really don't like to see is coaching problems. They had that too. They had 4 penalties for having 12 men on the field. At one point, I'm counting, and I count 12, and I said, is this going to be a free play for Alabama before they threw another flag? That's something that is strictly a coaching problem that, again, that happens in week one, too. Even the refs struggle with week one. TV struggles with week one. We didn't. We were excellent.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think you can tell a lot about some teams, and Alabama is certainly one of them. Louisville, I think, has a higher ceiling than you could tell. Those penalties cost them a lot, but they otherwise look like a structurally sound college football team for sure.
Well, I'll tell you, we don't need to really spend any time on talking about Georgia playing Austin
Peay. Well, I will say this because they lost their backup. I say backup. Their first team running back, Swift, was outstanding. Their second running back got a targeting penalty in the second half, which
So he
means
misses.
he's not in the first half against South Carolina in Columbia this weekend. That's kind of it's worth talking about.
And I think skipping over kind of South Carolina beating Coastal Carolina, because that's just really wasn't that big of a deal. And South Carolina looked good, of course. They still feel like they don't get any respect in the SEC or out in the rest of the world.
That's changing.
And I guess that plays to having the chip on your shoulder and all that. But we're going to find out about Georgia and South Carolina because it's one of the 3 good games coming up this coming weekend.
Yeah, it's kind of strange that week 2 has even fewer good games than week 1. There were actually a lot of fun games to watch and a lot of puke out there as well.
But Georgia USC at Columbia, and I think the Gamecocks have beaten Georgia and Columbia 4 out of 6 years or 4 out of 5 years.
Okay.
So they play Georgia tough. And I fully expect South Carolina to play Georgia tough again.
Yeah.
And we're going to find out really how good Georgia is because I think South Carolina is underrated. But Georgia, either they're going to rise to the occasion, they're going to be the team they were last year, or they're not. And we're going to get a lot of questions answered about the SEC just off of this game because there are a lot of people that are secretly not even secretly, that are saying that South Carolina could luck up this year and beat a few people they're not supposed to.
Well, there's a lot of debate about who could potentially win the SEC East. I think it's safe to say it's probably not going to be Tennessee, but it's also safe to say it might be South Carolina for sure. I think it's
It
a better
might be.
bet than, say, in Florida, for example, right?
Yeah, and Florida's just still such an unknown until they play somebody.
Right.
And, yeah, they supposedly found a quarterback. But I'm telling you, the Georgia fans, I'm sure, are going to be nervous this weekend because they know, no matter how much they want to be number one and jump up and down, they know that they struggle with South Carolina. And, there's something in the program at both schools that makes for a really, really competitive game.
Yeah.
And so the schemes match up. That could be the sleeper great game of the season is the Carolina-Georgia game.
I hope so. It
And
could
I
be
kinda,
fantastic.
And, and granted, as a Clemson fan, I don't really have a pull one way or the other, but I don't dislike any school really. So, I feel like I'd be kind of happy either way. I'd be happy with Georgia fans being a little upset if they lost. And I'd be fine if Carolina fans lost. Either way, I feel like I get a little pleasure out of it. So for me, this is a no-lose game because either team that loses, I have somebody on social media I can give a hard time to.
Oh, no.
All in fun, so the winner's kind of irrelevant to me. It's the loser that I'm going to enjoy because one way or another, I get to pick on somebody a little bit.
If it's South Carolina, it's a big deal. If it's Georgia, we're surrounded by Georgia and South Carolina fans. There's a bunch of them here in the upstate, and they're not going to be friendly to each other at the water cooler Monday morning. That's for sure, no matter what the result is.
And see, either way, I'm not going to do a pro-Georgia or a pro-South Carolina post or posts or memes, but I might do picking on whoever loses that game.
Do you have a pick for this game, Jay?
I think Georgia's going to win simply because they're, top to bottom a better team. But this is one of those games where I think if South Carolina plays inspired football and Georgia loses one fumble at the wrong time, I think South Carolina could sneak up on them. But if they win, it's going to be by 1 or 3 or 5 points. It's not going to be by a bunch.
I think South Carolina's going to score points, but I think Georgia wins. I think defense wins. That's the truth. And like it or not, however you feel about Austin Peay, Georgia put a 0 up. It's my favorite number because what it represents, it's hard to put a 0 on any team in the country no matter what, period. Florida State scored 3 points yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay, there's 3. It's not a 0. It's hard to do. They did it, and yeah, they're not going to hold South Carolina to 0, but I call that the X factor in this one.
Well, let's talk about that Florida State Virginia Tech game because to me personally, I felt like here's the perfect example of Virginia Tech had young people on defense, but their defensive coordinator's been there 31 years, so they've learned this system, even if they've only been there a year or two. So that defense didn't change, and they played their hearts out. Whereas Florida State, new coach, new scheme, offense and defense, and it's hard even though you may have more talent than Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
You change all of that and then go under the lights for the big pressure game, first game of the season, and I can see why Virginia Tech beat the crud out of Florida State.
I wouldn't say beat the crud out of them. Florida State actually outgained them, but we're here recording on a Tuesday because we thought it would be important to do it after the Monday night Florida State-Virginia Tech game. If you look at the score, it doesn't look like Florida State played. 24 or 27, they got beat down in spite of the fact that, like I said, they outgained Virginia Tech.
Right.
I think Miami did the same thing to LSU, but it didn't look like LSU struggled that much in the game. The score certainly doesn't reflect that either.
Well, I think Florida State's going to struggle with the new schemes in the big games, and they're going to beat a couple of really good teams, and Clemson better watch out, and a few others better watch out. Virginia Tech, same thing. I think if they play that inspired football, if they have a decent day, they're going to beat somebody. But I don't think either one of those teams this year is going to break out and all of a sudden go wild and end up winning the ACC.
I agree. There were a lot of doubts about Virginia Tech. I'm not sure most of them were silenced, but they do look like a good team for sure.
A good team.
We'll see where they go from here. Florida State, they still just don't have a good offensive line. They have 5 stars all over the place, but they don't have a star on the offensive line who can get it done. I think that's really the outlier. I had high hopes for Florida State this year. Again, like I said, they weren't terrible against Virginia Tech in spite of the score, but I was genuinely surprised at that score, if nothing else. This was at Florida State.
Yeah.
You had plenty of time to prepare. You know what Virginia Tech's bringing. You know they're bringing defense, and they held Florida State to almost no points. It's a big deal. It's a problem for Florida State. I'm not sure where they're going to go forward because this is week 1, so it doesn't answer all the questions. It may add a few more, but we know what Virginia Tech is, and the results prove that.
The other big games from this past weekend, Washington-Auburn.
Yeah, another
Holy
team.
cow.
Washington outgained Auburn.
Washington looks like, similar scenario, looks like the more talented team. But I tell you, the big guy was at number 3 or number 5 on the Auburn defensive line. Holy cow.
Yeah.
Scary. Like bigger, faster, quicker, meaner than anyone else I saw all weekend playing college football.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, that guy was unbelievable. And it looked like that if Auburn plays like that the rest of the season, Stidham stays healthy, Auburn's got a chance to beat almost anybody.
I think Auburn has to actually improve to have a chance to beat almost anybody. A lot of Auburn's success in this game was determined not just by Washington, but by Jake Browning at Washington. He made a lot of really bad, uncharacteristic mistakes that were all on him, and I hate to see that. It's tough, especially for a guy who's coming back for his senior season like that on the road in Atlanta. But hey, Auburn finally does pick up a win in Atlanta, so you got to give him credit for that for sure.
The other good game, or not good game, but I was real fascinated by was Miami LSU.
Yeah.
And LSU, their quarterback looks kind of bland, but he's good.
Well, first of all, he looks like he comes from Ohio State, right? Which he does.
Yeah.
But this is the best quarterback, I think, fundamentally speaking, that LSU has had in a while. What we also saw from LSU is, guess what? They have a very solid offense and defensive line.
Yeah.
They are officially a contender for the SEC West. They play Alabama in LSU after a bye week. That's going to be enormous. Obviously, that's going to be late at night. That game will be game of the week for sure. It's going to be tremendous.
Well, I don't. There were some times that LSU's defense was running blitzes and stuff where either they were so phenomenally prepared or Miami was so unbelievably unprepared. And it looked like Miami didn't know what they were doing with their offensive line at all.
It's true, and they kept looking to the sidelines for the coaches who weren't prepared to give them good answers either. I was sincerely surprised at how well LSU's coaching staff did and behaved in this game. You know, a lot of the offseason stuff that happened was not good for them. Obviously, Ed Orgeron getting rid of Matt Canada, who goes up and puts another L in Texas's back handbook, right?
Yeah.
So we know that wasn't necessarily a good move, except we saw the results. Again, there's still question marks for both Miami and LSU. I think Miami is a better team than the score reveals, and I don't think the score is necessarily indicative of what we're going to get from LSU all season long. But I put LSU a little bit ahead of Auburn right now.
Right.
Obviously, Alabama's got to be number one in the West. I'm not sure where to put Texas A&M, though.
You know, and I think after the Miami-LSU game, I think Miami is more the team that got beat up by Clemson last year and beat up by LSU this year than they are this unbelievable great team. And I think they're going to have moments of brilliance this year.
Yeah.
And I think LSU is too. But Miami obviously was overrated. And to be honest, neither Texas nor Miami are back.
Listen, you lose to Maryland at home. Shame on me for believing in you, Texas. You lose to Maryland again? Texas, shame on you.
Yeah,
Shame
you're obviously
on
not doing
you.
something in practice and preparation that works because you know the Maryland team. Yeah, that was kind of I was a little surprised. And then again, it's like, well, you know, great expectations bring about great disappointment a lot of times. And the only other real big game that I thought was, meaningful nationally was the Notre Dame-Michigan game. And, not being a Notre Dame fan, but yet really disliking Jim Harbaugh, I was kind of glad to see Michigan lose. And I think Notre Dame adds that wild card thing to the playoff mix that isn't Boise State,
Yes.
like it's a legitimate program, school, whatever, versus a smaller school that's going to come up and maybe mess up the playoff picture. So, yeah, Notre Dame could have a shot at messing up the whole playoff picture.
Boise State is on track to have a really good season and to have an epic season finale. However, I will go on record and say Notre Dame is better than Boise State. They looked like they answered all the questions we had with a positive answer. They looked like what I expect Notre Dame to look like every season, but they don't, and they did this season.
Yeah.
Brandon Wimbush definitely looks improved as a passer, as a decision maker. He was able to scramble, give himself an extra second, sometimes 2 seconds to make another throw. He wasn't flawless. Again, week one, you can say what you want. We've seen this from Notre Dame before where I can't tell what they're going to look like week to week, but their defense looked good. And Michigan, with Jim Harbaugh, 0-17 against ranked opponents on the road. I mean, they brought Jim Harbaugh in to win national championships or at least be competitive on a national scale. They're not doing it.
Yeah,
Jim
how's that
Harbaugh
working?
was a quarterback at Michigan, and he can't get a quarterback to come to Michigan. Shea Patterson, we had high hopes for him, but also a grad transfer. And when Kirby Smart has 3 5-star quarterbacks on his roster, Clemson lost one of them, but they still have 2 incredible quarterbacks on their roster. I don't know if there's any excuse for Jim Harbaugh at this point at all whatsoever.
Well, it's they're turning into kind of the Florida, Tennessee, LSU thing of if you don't get a great quarterback, you're really going to struggle to win some very important close games, and you're not going to win some of those. And I think at the end of this season, Harbaugh may be one of the big-name coaches that's on the chopping block. And I hate saying that, and then again, I don't.
It's going to heat up, that's for sure.
It's definitely going to get heated because if he doesn't start producing the way Michigan fans want them to produce, which means beating Ohio State, beating Notre Dame, and being in the national picture as somebody to be considered for the playoff, I think, again, Michigan's overrated, and they kind of got it handed to them by Notre Dame.
He still doesn't have, like I said, another quarterback on the roster. So if you're going to give him time, you're going to have to give him 3 years or so. I just don't know what to expect. It's got to be really tough for Michigan fans, for the Michigan administration. It's a strange time. It's good for the sport when these blue blood teams like Michigan and Notre Dame are nationally competitive. I sincerely believe that.
Right.
I was hopeful and now disappointed with Michigan's performance. With the dudes they have, it just did not look good.
Well, there are only 3 good games this coming week.
Okay.
There's more of the cupcake stuff going on than ever dreamed of in the first week, which is kind of hard to imagine. But really, one of the games that's going to determine, to me, I laugh because it's like we had talked about earlier. It's like they're playing to be 8th in the country.
Ooh.
And that's Stanford USC.
That's right.
Because the best they're going to be able to hope for this year is to be 8th in the country.
Ooh, gross.
And so I watched Stanford play this past weekend. And I thought they looked fair at best.
They couldn't get a running game established with
and
their
how do you do
Heisman
that?
hopeful Bryce Love.
How do you do that with a great offensive line and a great running back?
Well, San Diego State is another. There's a lot of good teams out there that people don't pay attention to because of their league. San Diego State is one of them. Middle Tennessee, they lost, but they're a good team, and nobody's talking about that loss. UCF looked outstanding again. There were questions there. Ohio University, Bowling Green. I mean, there's an awful lot of fun football. Furman's another good example, like I said before.
Troy.
You say all these big Power 5 teams are playing cupcakes. Guess what? If you want to watch Ohio University Bobcats, go Cats, because that's going to be a fun game this Saturday too. But you're right about Stanford. You were telling me before there was nobody in the stands because they don't start they don't start classes until the end of September.
Yeah, so it was really weird watching the game, and you
Strange.
looked around, and the stands looked like they're about a third to a half full. And I thought, what an oddity in modern college football that they're on a quarterly semester thing. And there are no students there.
It's disappointing.
It had to be no fun to play in that game because you have basically no support,
Clemson had a game at home versus a team that nobody expected them to have to compete with, and yet that stadium was filled.
There are 80,000 people
in a hot stadium.
Well, the other two games.
If Clemson didn't have classes until September, I have a problem suggesting they wouldn't have filled that stadium at all.
The other two games, we've already talked about Georgia, South Carolina, Clemson and Texas A&M.
Yep, on the road.
On the road.
Kyle Field.
12th man.
12th man, yes.
All that highfalutin cheer practice, the ROTC end of it. I mean, A&M's spent tens of millions of dollars and redid their stadium in the last few years. Yep. They've got all the money in the world. They've got Jimbo Fisher.
They have all the money that Texas doesn't have. Those are the two richest programs in college football by a landslide.
And watching them play this past weekend, yes, it looked like Florida State's offense had moved to Texas A&M. Mm-hmm. Yes, they looked pretty good, not phenomenal. But I tell you, I don't remember the kid's name, but they've got a tight end that was a monster on the field.
Our listeners don't come here for names, do they, Jay? For
no,
real
especially for A&M.
No.
So, to me, as a Clemson fan, going into that environment is going to be tough because, they haven't played there in modern history, so there's no reference to,
true.
This is what it's like. The second thing being Clemson's weakness over the last however many years Dabo's been there has been tight ends catching passes. And that was the trouble when they play Florida State. That's the trouble when they play Alabama. That's the trouble when they play anybody of any note.
Ooh.
Is tight ends catching passes seems to be their weakness. It's their Achilles heel.
But now they have a tight end named Galloway, and you never bet against the guy with Galloway on his back.
Man,
no way.
A&M was running two tight ends at the same time throughout the game, passing to both of them.
Yes.
And they are monsters on the field.
I thought they looked you said Jimbo Fisher brought Florida State's offense to Texas A&M. I thought he brought it with a side of chicken salad. He added something for sure to distribute the ball deliberately to those tight ends is something he wasn't doing at Florida State. It's a big reason why he lost that job. I sincerely didn't expect him to respond like this either.
I think the tight ends had more catches in their opening game than they did all season last year.
Wow. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. Or no, maybe it was just that one tight end.
Okay.
That one tight end, I think, had 6 receptions last year, and he had at least 8 or 9 in this game. So that tells you there's a different strategy. They do have a good running attack. They do have a decent quarterback. I think the line is 12.5 right now in favor of Clemson. I think Clemson's going to win the game, but I don't think Clemson is going to cover that spread. I think this is going to be the scare game for Clemson until we get to the end of the season, because it sets up that if Clemson isn't, running out there screaming, hitting hard, flying all over the place from the first second, they're going to find themselves having to bring in Trevor Lawrence to catch up. And if that's the case, then the A&M defense can just key on stopping the pass.
It seemed like Clemson has a plan to deliberately be a two-system quarterback.
Yeah.
Or two-quarterback system, excuse me.
And I'm fine with Kelly Bryant. And Kelly Bryant's a great player. And I love seeing Trevor Lawrence play. But it's a different thing if you're down like 20-10 to an A&M at A&M, and you're having to bring in Trevor Lawrence to catch up. Okay. So I sure hope that Dabo gets them prepped to start the game off fiercely, because the sooner they can get that crowd out of the game, the sooner the defense can kind of control the line of scrimmage.
Good point.
Then Clemson's got a chance. And if Clemson wins by 10, I will be thrilled.
Well, I'm going to say right here on the podcast, you're in luck. I think Clemson covers the spread, and I'm not trying to sound like a homer here. I think Clemson's secondary has some issues, but I don't think Texas A&M can necessarily take advantage of it. I thought Clemson's experienced players, particularly those guys on the D-line that everybody's talking about, looked completely ready to play in big games. There was a moment where Furman came off sides. Those guys didn't budge. They knew what to expect. It was a free play. Clemson took advantage of it. It wasn't a catch, but they were prepared in a way that I didn't see from a lot of teams in week one. If you're traveling to College Station this weekend, God bless you, because they are not going to make it too much fun. It's not a bad place to watch a college football game at all, but that stadium is massive. It's enormous. It will mess with you.
It's
and then they do the
100,000.
12-man thing, which will make you dizzy. There's nothing quite like it in college football. Clemson's going to be put on the side of the field that doesn't have shade. They have seat coolers there, which is nice, but when Alabama traveled there a few years ago, lo and behold, those seat coolers didn't work. If they try to pull stuff like that, which is completely allowed in the sport, I don't think it plays to their advantage. Dexter Lawrence, he came off the field a little slow at one point in the Furman game, but he said that was because he got poked in the eye. I think he's ready to play. I don't think they would have let him talk to the press if he had a real big injury. However, those guys didn't look like they were afraid at all of being in the heat. They looked way too excited to be out there cooking all day long, and they were.
And not Alabama, Texas A&M is really hopeful that they're better than they suspect they are.
Yes.
So there's all this kind of optimism around the program, a new coach and all that, and we're going to find out real quick. We're going to know by the middle of second quarter really what kind of team both Clemson and A&M have.
It's true.
And, is Clemson's running attack going to be able to do something? Because if it doesn't, then it becomes a very difficult game for Clemson.
Yes.
Because the second they bring in Trevor to throw it around, A&M gets to pin their ears back. And I just don't know what that's going to look and feel like.
Kelly Bryant can throw the ball very well, too. But I think the outlier is now he has guys like Justin Ross, who is a true slot receiver. Yes, now they have a guy who can actually take advantage of that. Alabama had the same thing with Jalen Waddle. Oh, man, he was absolutely outstanding. Another true freshman. I think Clemson has enough weapons. If they can utilize those weapons on offense, I think that's the outlier, and that's what I think is going to happen. Look, don't forget, Jimbo Fisher he did a really good job of distributing the ball this past weekend. If he does that against Clemson, it will be more competitive, but it's still a true pro-style offense. They're not running these crazy sweeps like we saw Furman do. I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball. It's going to be explicitly dependent on Texas A&M's ability to pass. Yes, Clemson's secondary had some issues, but I don't think it's necessarily a big enough advantage to say that they're going to cover the spread. I think Clemson is going to cover. I think if they take advantage of those weapons and Etienne has a breakout day, which I would not be surprised if he does, that's going to be a big deal. Clemson has enough weapons and ability from side to side and end zone to end zone on offense that It's hard for me to say that it's not going to be a Clemson win big.
I'm telling you, if ETN has a big day, Clemson wins. If Hunter Renfrow catches 10 passes, Clemson wins.
10 passes? Jay, that's a hot take.
I know. But I'm saying that, if all of a sudden A&M's going to concentrate on not letting Trevor or Kelly throw long downfield, then it has to become, a tight end Hunter Renfrow game. And, Hunter is like the secret weapon. And it's like 1 out of every 4 games. And all of a sudden, boom. Holy cow.
But he's not a secret. Here's my whole thing. A lot of people have been saying, how much is Clemson hiding before going to A&M? How much are they disguising what they're going to look like? I don't think a team like Clemson is going to disguise much. They may work a trick play or two in there, but I wouldn't be surprised if they don't, because when you're that talented, you don't have to disguise it. Yes, Hunter Renfrow, great receiver, but Clemson has so many weapons on offense to get the ball to. Running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends, and they distributed the ball well too. They simply have more weapons than A&M, and I don't think they're bothered by big-time games, especially in particular because they have so much experience on the defense. These guys have been in big games before. They're used to it. They're not afraid of it. I think it actually plays into their favor.
Well, I'm hopeful. I'm always the cautiously optimistic Clemson fan. So, if they get past A&M, Clemson's got it made because, granted, they have to suffer through Georgia Tech, Georgia Southern in the next couple of games. I don't see that being a problem. They get Syracuse at home, which I think they're going to pound Syracuse because of last year. But and Wake's not going to be anything powerful this year. And to be honest, I'm kind of looking forward to the NC State game at Clemson.
Are you really?
Because I think there is going to be punishment doled out. And it is going to be, and has become over the last year, because of the coaches sniping at each other, the rivalry game for Clemson is NC State. And I think they're going to do everything in their power to embarrass them.
They will. NC State didn't look good.
And,
against John Hancock, I think it was. James Madison.
Yeah.
Let's say J.O. man, but that's
and James Madison's part of the Colonial Athletic Conference that Elon's in. So are the Richmond Spiders. There's some good teams in the CAA.
They won their conference last year, right?
Right. So those are the games I'm looking forward to.
Okay.
But outside of that, what else you want to discuss this week?
Well, I want to recap that we didn't talk about this last week, but my hot take was that the Penn State Nittany Lions had a chance to win at home against App State, and now we know I'm correct. Penn State beats App State at home. Wow.
I think Penn State is teetering on that overrated bit. Everybody loses a game every now and then. It's like Clemson losing to Syracuse last year. Nobody saw that coming. Syracuse shouldn't have won they
hate those Friday night games.
But there is something about the little school. It's kind of an American hero story. And the idea that it wasn't on the anniversary of them beating
That's exactly
Michigan?
right, of that big upset against Michigan. This was not all that dissimilar. The truth is, I don't dislike Penn State, but they got outplayed. The only one of the big defining plays of the game was a fake kick where the kicker runs it out to like the 50. Two of the guys from App State had backed off because it looked like he was going to actually hit the ball with his foot. If they hadn't backed off, it's definitely a win. Penn State got outplayed.
Yeah, they really did.
Again, week one, I don't know what this really means, but in week one, it does mean something. But hey, Penn State wins at home against App State. I called it.
Well, what it does show in week one, so Furman, I think Clemson looked a little vulnerable. Penn State was vulnerable. A lot of these teams, Miami, they didn't play well. Virginia Tech dominating Florida State. What it does show you is who preps better in the month of August for that first game.
Yeah.
And that's where, granted, Alabama was playing a cupcake. Not really, but Louisville wasn't supposed to be a cupcake game. They looked like a cupcake game.
They were able to take out a lot of starters.
Alabama prepped better in August than Louisville did. And there's some coaching programs that are much better at that than others.
It's true. Ohio State left their starters in when they had 63 points on the board.
Yeah.
They allowed Oregon State to score 31 on them in Columbus. It's worth noting that defensive line simply did not look great. A lot of things went their way. I'm not saying Ohio State's a bad team. Again, week one doesn't necessarily answer all the questions, but it does give you a glimpse into what you should be able to expect. And they do not look as much of a guarantee as teams like Georgia, Clemson, and Alabama right now. That's the bottom line.
And I'd tell you the hot team that I think is going to just ride this year, and granted, they always seem to be in it, but you'd think Baker Mayfield leaving Oklahoma would leave a hole. Oklahoma looked fierce in their opening game.
Yeah, I was really hopeful Lane Kiffin was going to turn up the juice. I think he did his best, but no. Florida Atlantic loses on the road at Oklahoma, and
Oklahoma
they got
looks
beat
great.
bad. Well, they were clearly the better team.
Yeah.
We saw a lot of that where not necessarily the better team won by a bigger margin this weekend. But, yeah, Oklahoma definitely looks like they're competitive. West Virginia as well. It's going to be a big matchup when those two play. They're probably going to face each other twice in the Big 12 championship game. So, Will Greer.
He's the goods.
Yeah, well,
I guess that'll wrap up this week, the podcast. And be sure and read Fête magazine. Be sure to go to iongreenville.net and enter the Pick'em contest for football.
My picks were terrible this week.
And I would like to say, as the non-expert of our duo, that it is very nice having a 3-game lead over Gray Thompson after the first week of picks. Now, neither one of us did well in the grand scheme of things.
Well,
but the
my
idea,
picks were as putrid as Tennessee in 2017. They were worse than a Big Ten defensive line. It was really bad. But I'm happy to be so wrong this week, for sure.
Yeah,
it was fun.
I look forward to seeing you doing this, talking about it next week. Get out there and read Fête magazine, and we'll see you later.
Big win over A&M on the road. Go Tigers.
Fête it be.
Fête it be.